The Just Lead Advancing Racial Equity Conference, hosted by New Detroit, brought together national and local speakers who provided compelling insights into racial equity and justice. Khary Fraiser, Detroit is Different, provides you conversations with some of the phenomenal guests, talking dismantling racism with collaborative solutions.
This is Allandra Bulger, the Executive Director of Co.act Detroit, and I'm at Just Lead 2023.
Detroit is different here at the Just Lead Conference 2023 for New Detroit, and I'm with someone that just left the closing panel and for certain was giving different flavor, and ideas, but more so, as we say in Detroit is Different, the game on where it is.
Yes,
Allandra Bulger of Co.act, how are you today?
I'm well, Khary. Thank you so much for having me.
Always. So long overdue, and more will come.
Yes.
But before we even get into that, let's get into today's discussion. We're talking about racial equity and leading in this space.
Yes.
Providing opportunity to organizations, businesses, empowering a lot of things from the lens of Co.act,
yes,
and the leadership position. What is it that you hear when you are empowering some of these organizations that usually are not seeking about the barriers they face through seeking racial equity? And do you think the fact that the role you play as a black woman in this leadership has a different spin on how the people open up to you to understand this problem?
Wow, those are great questions. I think I'll start by saying, first and foremost, I don't empower anybody. And I say that because the community, the folks who are leading nonprofits in our community already are full of power. So my role is to really be a partner, to enable an environment so that the folks who are doing the really great work in our community can get access to the resources that they need to do that work. I think when we talk to particularly organizations that are on the ground, so smaller organizations led by Black and brown folk, first and foremost, we see that they're doing amazing work. But they're often doing that amazing work with limited resources, right? Limited staffing, limited funding. And so when we think about the needs of those organizations, we advocate for general operating support. So those organizations having access to flexible funding that they can use in the ways that they see fit. We also advocate for connecting folks to each other. So one of the big things that we do at Co.act is we create an environment for folks to come together, learn together, to problem solve together. And so I think oftentimes, because we just look at the money, we have a scarcity mindset around what we can actually do together. And a lot of times, if you've got someone on the east side that's working on something and someone on the west side that's working on something and they're very similar, sometimes just getting those folks together can make all the difference in the world. I think in terms of me being in my role, one of the things that I've benefited from tremendously to get to my role and then to stay in my role is mentorship from other Black women and Black men, but particularly Black women. And so, I don't know that me being in the role makes folks open up more, but it certainly has fostered authentic relationship building where I'm now in a space of my career where I'm providing that same level of mentorship, or I am working with other organizations in our community, particularly other intermediary organizations, to make sure that we are ensuring that folks have a seat at the table to share their experiences, their desires, their hopes, and their dreams.
That's deep, and definitely, as we say here on Detroit is Different, some good game, good information for New Detroit. So with that naturally just parlays into the next question. As you listen, because that's basically, you say you're a partner in listening.
Yes.
And you're taking in everything that's said and looking to just foster sometimes the other relationships. Those relationships yourself, where do you seek the resources that you get about making sure that you're making the right steps? You mentioned mentorship for yourself, but what other tools have you found successful as assets in the work you do?
Yeah, I mean, Your question makes me think about that from a couple of lenses. So I do lead an organization, which means that I am responsible for the fiscal sustainability of that organization, right? So similar to the folks that I'm serving, we also have to, seek funding for our organization. And we're very intentional and deliberate in the way that we do that. Co.act was launched with initial investment from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. And one of the things that that funding provided that many organizations don't have access to is multi-year funding. So we received a 3-year grant that allowed us to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we planned our work out. But that's one funder. And so as we've expanded those philanthropic partnerships, we look for value alignment. We look for organizations that have equity at the center of their work. We look for organizations, funders that are also willing to come and be a partner with us. So, you heard me in the plenary say, cut the check, but also in cutting that check, bring your expertise, bring your resources, bring your strategic thinking to the table so that we can create something beautiful together. In terms of sustaining my own leadership and the resources that I look to, again, certainly peers, mentors. I also invest a lot into my leadership. I work with a coach. I make sure that I get my rest so that I can, take time to pause and reflect and synthesize all the things that I'm learning and doing, so that I can come to the work from a place that's sustainable and healthy for me.
All right, last question for you.
All right.
Racial equity and in that training and learning and being expressions like this, can you give an example where you've seen it manifest where it's like, wow, it's connecting. I think this group, this organization, this leader, they're getting this concept.
Yeah, I think there are two pieces of work that I would lift up. And two that we're involved in, not necessarily leading. One, and I spoke about this in the plenary a little bit, is this work around rest and liberation. And so I got to give a shout out to Shamil Dobbs at Michigan Community Resources, who was really the catalyst for this work. But it is taking a holistic look at exactly what you talked about, like organizations that need more resources, looking at it again through that lens of healing, rest, and autonomy, right, and self-determination. And what are the tools to get maybe smaller organizations who are often doing the most important work in our community? What are the tools that we can have that allow them to hire more folks, right? Part of it is if you've got 1 or 2 staff, or maybe sometimes no staff. Some of these organizations are volunteer-led, and they are the ones that are making sure that folks are fed. They're the ones that are making sure that folks get transportation to certain places, and they never get the investment to be able to hire or to scale up. They're going to constantly be in a rat race of chasing those funds. They're going to constantly be in a rat race of being exhausted and overworked, right? And so I would point to that report that has a number of recommendations about how the nonprofit sector, but also the philanthropic community, can invest in the tools and tactics that would assist with that. The other piece that I would call out is our own work. So at Co.act, we serve as a grant maker. That's one of the things that we do, and we intentionally do that through a lens of racial equity and racial justice. And so, one of the programs that we did, which was called the Activate Fund, which was all about providing capacity building grants to nonprofits. We did grants up to $50,000 to nonprofits, and we recruited an advisory committee made up of folks in the nonprofit community. We recruited a selection community of residents, and when it was all said and done, we centered BIPOC leaders and organizations in that, and the majority of those grants went to BIPOC-led organizations as well as women-led organizations.